So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the August meeting of the Western BCP Planning Committee. Before we go any further, I'd like to hand over to the Democratic Services Officer sitting beside me, who will give us housekeeping notices and other items of formality.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public, although ultimate discretion in this matter lies with the Chair in case of disruption. For those in the room, please note if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building in Bourne Avenue. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you. Are you happy for me to go on to apologies, Chair?
Yes, please. Apologies.
Lovely.
And then any substitutes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we've received apologies from Councillor Peter Cooper, Councillor John Challoner, Councillor Joe Clements and Councillor Joe Salmon. There are no substitute members, Chair.
We'll ask everyone to introduce themselves and our role in this meeting. I'll start. I'm Marion Lepedvin. I'm Chair of the Western Planning Committee and I'm a councillor for Newtown and Heatherlands Ward. So we'll talk to members of the committee first.
Gillian Martin, Boscombe West, just member of the committee.
Councillor Chapman Law, Alney and Bourne Valley.
Councillor Simon McCormack, Burton and Grange Ward.
Councillor Karen Rampton, Talbot and Branksome Woods Ward.
Councillor Brian Hitchcock, Hamworthy.
And Peter Sidaway, Broadstone Ward.
Thank you. And now we will move on to officers who are here.
Camilla Bastidas, Planning Officer.
Dominica Robbins, Senior Planning Officer.
Casey Harrington, Development Management Manager.
And the Democratic Services Officer, who hasn't introduced herself yet.
Rebecca Rhodes, Clerk to the committee today.
Thank you, everyone. There will also be other officers online available if we need to ask about any particular items of detail. So, any declarations of interest? I know we've got one.
Yes, Chair, I have an interest in the second item, so I'll be standing down for that one and speaking from the over there instead of here.
Thank you. And item 4, confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of July. Is everyone happy to accept these as a true record? I see lots of nods and yes, thank you. So we'll be moving on to the planning applications now. We have 2 this morning. When the case officer has done the presentation, there will be any public speakers for or against, ward councillors, and then we will move on to members of the committee to ask questions and finally debate and come to a decision. So item number 1 is actually item 6A, flat 2, 143 Alexandra Road, Poole. So I'll hand over to Dominica Robbins to present the case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Committee. The application is for alteration to the existing incidental to enjoyment building associated with the first floor flat at 143 Alexandra Road to convert it into ancillary accommodation. The application site is located on the eastern side of Alexandra Road at Upper Parkston in Poole and is occupied by the first floor flat within 2-storey detached building. The outbuilding that is the subject of this application is sited at the back of the application site. It is a single-storey flat roof structure that consists of working from home space, gym with kitchenette, toilet, garage and storeroom. Photos from the site. Internally, the existing work-from-home space would be converted into lounge and a garage and storeroom into 2 bedrooms. And externally, to the garage doors would be, to the west would be replaced by 2 windows, so not many external changes. The applicant in the statement explains that the annex would be occasionally used by the elderly parents visiting the family and by friends, It is explained that the kitchenette area is only suitable for preparing drinks, snack and washing up as it is currently used. All meals would be prepared in a flat and brought down to the guest, and laundry also will be done in a flat. It is explained that the applicant's parents and friends would be staying in the annex only for limited time, and in between these stays, the building would be used as the applicant's gym and training room. The proposed annex would share the access, parking and external amenity space with the parent dwelling. Therefore, functional connection with the main dwelling is demonstrated. The annex will be ancillary to it, and together with the main dwelling would remain as a single planning unit in accordance with policy PP13 of the pool local plan. Condition is proposed to be imposed to use the proposed annex for residential purpose ancillary to the main property only, shall not be used as a separate unit or living accommodation, commercial use, and should not be let separately for seasonal or holiday or permanent time period. Regarding impact on the character and appearance of the area, the existing outbuilding is sited at the back of the rear garden of the application site as a single story in scale. The only external changes are to replace the existing garage doors with windows, and due to small scale of these changes, the proposal is considered to preserve the character and appearance of the area. Regarding the neighboring amenities and privacy, there are no extensions or alterations proposed within the existing structure other than garage doors to be replaced with 2 windows. Those windows would overlook the garden of the parent dwelling, and any views towards the neighboring properties would be screened by the existing boundary treatment. Therefore, privacy and amenities of the neighboring properties would be preserved. Regarding parking provision, there is no requirement for additional parking spaces for annexes according to BCP parking standards XPD, and remaining parking provision of 2 parking spaces is considered to be sufficient for the annex and for the existing dwelling. Therefore, overall, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you. Amended has been done to my report, correcting location of the application site. It's not to the west of the Alexandra Road, but to the east. Thank you.
To be clear, that's in the amendment sheet.
Thank you very much. So now we move on to speakers, and we've got 2 objectors. One with us in person and one online, and between them they have 5 minutes speaking time. So, Adrian Parr, if you would like to come up to the microphone.
Thank you. My name is Adrian Parr and I speak on behalf of 19 objectors. My family and I live at 1438 Alexandra Road. The application site wraps around the side and rear of our garden. We bought our home in 2016 to raise our family in a characterful, long-established residential area, with a back garden stretching into the protected green corridor between Alexandra Road and Crescent Road. It was comforting that the characteristics that drew us here were protected within the BCP local plan, in particular policies PP27, PP28 and PP13. This protection was tested in 2019 when a plan to convert the same building into a 2-bedroom bungalow was refused by both the council and at appeal partly on grounds of harm to local character. In the planning inspectorate's words, Windows would change its character as a functional outbuilding to a more overtly residential building that would appear as an incongruous dwelling into the green space. It would not, therefore, reflect the local pattern of development. What you are being asked to judge now is conversion of the same building, the same addition of windows and the same access gates. Regardless that the plot won't be severed for now, the visual effect would be the same, that of a residential bungalow sitting incongruously within the green corridor. As recently as July 10th, an application for 86 Alexandra Road was refused. The same planning officer stated, by virtue of the proposal consisting of a single-storey bungalow, the proposal would be at odds with the character of the 2-storey dwellings within the locality. Despite early refusals under the same local plan, we face the prospect of directly overlooking a bungalow with just 20 metres between two of our bedroom windows and the proposed windows. Planning permission in 2016 for a home office and garages stipulated that it never be used for habitable use, to protect the amenity of neighbouring properties and prevent overdevelopment. The term ancillary is open to interpretation, and earlier protections afforded to neighbours will be removed, leading to loss of privacy, disruption and noise from vehicles. We remain unconvinced that any conditions will be adhered to. An earlier condition for a sedum roof is still outstanding, despite us reporting it many years ago. Unauthorised internal changes have also been made. An ancillary use only condition would be harder to monitor, especially given that it is only a kitchen away from being a fully livable space. The applicant's personal need for this accommodation is factually incorrect and should be dismissed. The applicant no longer lives at flat 2. It has been up for sale and let for 2 years. We ask that you refuse this application accordingly. Thank you.
Online, we have Stephanie Newton, who also wishes to object. I hope she's with us on Teams.
I am. Thank
She is?
you.
Good, good.
Just bear with me one moment. I'll bring it up. Thank you. My name is Stephanie Newton. I live at flat 143 Alexandra Road, which is below the applicant's flat, and we share a driveway. I'd like to challenge the recommendation to approve this planning decision on planning grounds and failure to comply with policies PP13 and PP27 of the adopted pool local plan. The planning officer explains that the reasons for allowing the development under PP13 are that the applicant's parents are elderly, live in a different town, and that the building will be converted between a gym and a residential unit each time someone comes to stay. The planning department and this committee have been deliberately misled on this, as the applicant moved out from the property 2 years ago when they purchased another house and the property is occupied by a tenant. The need for the applicant to house their parents is therefore entirely fictitious. In addition, the building in question is no longer used as a gym, and therefore the proposed switching between a gym and residential annex has also been fabricated. The impact on neighbouring amenity is also a consideration under policy PP13. The planning officer's report states that, I quote, any noise would not be materially different from that expected from occupation of the existing dwelling house. This is grossly incorrect, as the noise and disturbance from residential uses is substantially greater than from an outbuilding. Nowhere does the report acknowledge that the driveway is shared with my driveway, and this has been overlooked. The extra noise and light from the proposed residential use and from additional vehicles on the shared gravel driveway will result in an unacceptable loss of amenity at my property. There were 19 local objections to this application, which also indicates the degree of effect the proposal will have on neighbouring properties. Adopted policy PP13 Part E requires that proposals which have an adverse effect upon the amenity of neighbouring properties must not be permitted, and the proposal should be refused on these grounds. The application for the use of this building for residential purposes was refused firstly by the planning officer at Poole Borough Council and then by the government's planning inspector at appeal in 2019. This was because the use of this building for residential purposes would be harmful to the character of the area under policy PP27. The planning inspector described the proposed residential use of this building as isolated backland development, which fails to respect the prevailing and established form of development. The latest planning officer's report disregards this and confusingly argues that the proposal would preserve the residential character of the area because the external changes to the existing outbuilding would be minor. This fails to recognise that the change of use of a backyard building for residential purposes is the concern, and how incongruous backland development at this location would be. I urge this planning committee to concur with the previous planning decision and the views of the planning inspectorate on the effects upon character and refuse this application under policy PP27. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And you both kept to time admirably. So well done. And now we move on to a speaker in support of the application, the agent Deborah Slade.
Morning everyone, thank you for considering our application. As you've heard, the proposal in this case is to alter the existing substantial outbuilding within the grounds of the host property to provide an annex serving the flat. This is totally different from the previous proposal, which was for a house which was dismissed on appeal and wasn't submitted by the applicant. The building, as you can see, is already an incidental use serving the host dwelling, and the proposal here is to change this to an ancillary use, which is specifically allowed through policy PP13 of the Poole Local Plan. This would allow the applicant to live in her flat whilst her parents and friends could visit and stay in the annex at various times as required. They would be catered for and provided for from the host property. Future-proofing the property in this way would allow greater care of the parents in due course, which Hannah can't provide from the property at the present time. Policy PP13 specifically provides for this form of multi-generational and extended family arrangement, and it's a common circumstance to find annex accommodation serving a host property in this way. In planning law, changing an outbuilding from incidental to ancillary use is not a material change of use, and in this case there is already a spacious outbuilding which can provide the annex accommodation with very little change to the building itself, just the insertion of 2 windows. There's already parking space on site for visiting family, and the only external alteration, which would be the change to the 2 windows, would face directly back into the applicant's garden. No other changes to the site would be required to accommodate the proposal, so there would be very little impact on the wider surroundings. No changes to the garden area would take place, and using the property as 2 bedrooms for elderly parents would not change the material circumstances affecting neighbours' amenity. As the proposal complies with policy PP13, it's hoped that planning permission can be granted. Thank you, and please let us know if you've got any questions.
Thank you. We have no ward councillors registered to speak, so now we open up to the committee for questions, unless the officers have got anything from the submissions for or against they wish to follow up on.
No, I will wait for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So, questions. In fact, I'm going to start off. It's on the driveway. I had already wondered whether the downstairs flat, 143, has use of the driveway and the parking at the rear, and the submission suggested that they do. Can you confirm that that's the case?
As far as I understand from the submission, the ground floor flat uses the front of the driveway.
But are there any restrictions on it?
Chair, so not in planning, so matters of rights of access, etc., sit outside the planning system, but it's nothing that we are aware of that restricts it through planning.
So they're supposed to use the front, but there's nothing to stop them using the back. Is that right?
I suppose so.
Not through planning.
Not through planning. Right. Okay. Thank you. So who would, if it's not planning, who would?
It'll be a civil matter. If there's anything on the deeds, it will be a civil matter.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So, committee, any other questions? Councillor Sidaway.
I think the obvious thing is what is the difference between this and the previous proposal, because it looks pretty identical to me. I'm struggling to see.
You mean the rejected? You mean the rejected one?
Yes.
Well, first of all, the previous application was for separate dwelling, for a 2-bedroom dwelling, and this one is for the annex. So it's completely different consideration, different policies taken into consideration.
Just to come in there, so we need to assess the proposal before us, and that's been quite clear in appeal decisions, etc. What they're applying for is an ancillary use and annex, which is different from a change of use to a residential dwelling. So we are assessing an annex here, and the report obviously goes through whether or not it meets the requirements to be an annex.
Yeah, okay, I get that. But the layout is exactly the same as the one. All they've done is change the words that say it's no longer a 2-bedroom dwelling.
Well,
it's an ancillary to the house, and it looks like a 2-bedroom dwelling to me. I'm sorry.
Well, they've removed the kitchen, I believe.
No kitchenette is staying in
There's
place.
a sink at the end of the lounge.
There's a kitchenette.
Yeah.
The difference is no plot severance is proposed anymore. It will be part of the cartilage of the flat. Yeah, like I said, we consider it against policy PP13, so that will be ancillary. Will be sharing the access. Will be staying as one unit of living planning unit. Therefore, there is nothing for us to say that will be separate dwelling. There is no plot severance in, first of all, proposed.
So let's look at the rules around plot severance, because I understand it, plot severance doesn't come before planning. So they could, once they've done this, just sever the plot, couldn't they?
So I'm just going to come in here, Chair. So physically the building's the same as what's refused before. The difference is the proposed use, how it's going to be used, etc. With regards to plot severance, anyone can erect a fence in a garden to subdivide it. The difference, again, it comes down to the use. If they were to use it as a separate dwelling, that would be unauthorised, subject to enforcement action, potentially. And that's where the difference is.
But just a final point for me then, so if they want to do that, they would have to come back and ask for a change of use.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Martin, then Councillor Chapman-Law.
I don't quite understand, because they've said they're not going to use it, the kitchen's not going to be used as a kitchen, in that meals are going to be cooked in the main dwelling, the host dwelling, and brought down to people staying there. And I'm not quite sure how they're going to manage that if they're not actually living there. They're not actually living in the host dwelling, are they? You know what I mean? It's a bit of a tale, really. So I don't understand, if they need an annex for elderly parents, why don't they build one where they're actually living? Because then it would be a lot easier to make meals there and carry them down to the garden. I mean, if it's an annex, I don't understand why it needs a kitchenette. If you stay in a hotel room, you're just given a kettle on a tray with some cups, you know, and you wash up in the bathroom. I don't understand why they need the kitchen.
Answering the first question, if the applicant lives in the property, for my knowledge, they do. That's what is stated in a statement. Nothing is written that they don't live in there. That's why they apply for an annex for friends and elderly parents. Why kitchenette? It's not unusual within the annexes that actually kitchenette is allowed, having microwave, or even a hob is sometimes allowed. Even inspector does allow stuff like that. So we cannot say, if it's not fully furnished kitchen, that cannot exist within an annex.
Councillor Chapman-Law.
So obviously, I'm not going to repeat anything that we've gone over already with the questions, but with the windows, that was one of the reasons for rejection last time, wasn't it? So replacing the garage doors with the windows. Why is that not? Is that still a consideration now? And if not, why not?
Here you can see on the screen now there is a refuse scheme. The windows were basically like folding of French door, so quite deep, high. The current proposal consists only for normal size windows. And again, is a different consideration when we assessed separate dwelling in a back garden, different than the annex. That consideration of the inspector was associated with the separate dwelling. So it wasn't just out of the context, just windows.
Any more questions? Councillor Sidaway again.
Yeah. Sorry, just picking up on that point and the separate dwelling. Are the parents supposed to be living there full time in that annex?
No, like I said in my presentation, that is only for some period of time. Same friends. The applicant did explain that will be just at the time of the visit, and while it's not occupied by parents or friends, the applicant will be using the space as a training gym room.
Okay. Well, you showed the windows of the refuse scheme. Can you show us the windows? Because I think I'm looking at the right thing here.
We're looking at the western elevation, two windows here.
Yeah.
It's a front of the building facing the existing flats. And refuse scheme did consist of a
Okay.
Yeah,
And
French door.
where are the neighbours that are that have spoken so far? One of them is obviously the other flat, but the 19 that are they complaining about the front windows or the back windows?
Sorry, members, just to mention that condition 3 also restricts the use to an annex only, and that's set out in the committee report.
Councillor
How are we going to monitor use of this moving forward? This is my concern. You know, if they start just using it as a separate dwelling, my concern is it's going to, how is it going to be monitored? And how is enforcement going to take place if they do that? This is my worry.
So, Chair, we have a reactionary enforcement service. We don't actively monitor, and so we're relying on people reporting any breach to us. And if the change of use were found to be occurred, then they could be subject to enforcement action, which will initially result in investigation, nature of the breach, and an enforcement notice if there was a breach occurring there. So we can take enforcement action against such uses.
Any more questions? Councillor Sidaway.
I know the relevance of where they live is not material to us particularly, but given it is absolutely material to the use of the property, and that is the key that makes it an annex, are we able to establish the difference between the objectors saying, two sets of objectors saying they don't live there and the applicant saying they do? Because that's clearly key to the use of the property.
So again, we need to look at what's been applied for. So it's not personal permission. So it's an annex ancillary use against the host property, which is the upset flat. So if it were the case that the applicants aren't living there and they're bringing random people in to live in that accommodation, then that would be, and they're not using that top flat as for the main source of meals, etc., then that's likely to be a change of use occurring, which wouldn't be covered by this consent if it were, because consent were to be granted. But if someone else was living up there and that was being used as an annex for that host property, then there'll be no breach.
Just thinking hypothetically, if we were to allow this, could a condition involve the use of the property for overnight stays to a certain restricted number of nights in the year, say?
It's nothing.
I mean, is that a condition that we are able to impose should we wish to?
Well, it's not specified by policy PP13, and also, no, I don't think so. Actually, if we can restrict the number of nights.
Yeah, if I can come in, Chair. For it used to be ancillary, it doesn't have to be restricted for a number of nights. They could live in there permanently and still be an annex, so it would not meet the 6 tests for a condition to do that.
I'm now struggling to know if that could be used every night of the year.
Yeah.
How that changes isn't a dwelling, a separate dwelling.
Again,
even if it's family members. I mean, you know.
Chair, if I just jump in. Oops, God, since the microphone's very sensitive today. For an annex is all about sharing with the host property, so they can live in there all year round, but it must be dependent on the host property it cannot be capable in itself for independent living. So it's got the things that are normally shared are meals, so washing facilities, garden space, that sort of thing. And that's what makes it, and that's the difference between being a independent dwelling and an annex, essentially. It's similar to having, I'm sure you've seen, a mobile home in your garden as an annex, where you can't do your full washing or meals or etc.
Thank you. We've had reference to the separation distance at the front. What's the separation distance at the back or the sides of the property?
Which property are you asking for?
The property under discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, but from
The
what?
possible annex.
Between the existing building and the annex?
The one behind it. I think he said was 20 metres away.
It is about 20, between the main building and the annex is about between 15 and 20.
But what about behind the houses in the next row back?
Well, there is the outbuilding, bear in mind, is existing. So that structure is there. And it's just on the boundary with the eastern and southern property.
Just again to be clear, there's boundary fencing, so any views from the windows will be obscured.
Right. Okay, so if there's no more questions, we'll move on to debate as to whether or not we think this application should be approved. Councillor Hitchcock.
I don't think anybody wants to approve it. It's a case of what we could refuse it on, I think, is the issue. I think if the applicants were actually living in the apartment, I think people might think a little bit different, but it's clear that if they've not been there for the last 2 years, they're clearly going to use it as an Airbnb at some point. And if we can't regulate that, then what are we going to refuse it on?
I suppose I ought to put a caveat. We've been told that they're not living in the property. We haven't actually got proof of that. I mean, we take the objector at his word, but that he's telling the truth, but we have no objective proof that that is in fact the case.
Perhaps we should try and get proof.
And I'm not sure under planning terms it's relevant anyway, unfortunately.
Yeah, sorry, Chair, Peter, if I can jump in there. I think it's not personal permission they're seeking. It would be whether the use is ancillary to the host dwelling, which is the flat above. So in that sense, it's irrelevant whether that individual's living there. But what we're talking about is the use.
Councillor Chapman.
Just echoing what's going on over there. I don't think that it's going to be difficult to refuse this based on the planning rules. But I would like to offer some reassurance that enforcement does actually work. I had quite a similar situation a few doors down from myself a few years ago, where they were building a garage which was had insulated walls, windows, Velux windows in the roof, and various other dwelling related stuff which wasn't on the plan, and the roof plan wasn't right either. A number of residents complained about it, and they had to come back and fix it and make it into a garage. So enforcement does work. It does, I believe you said that it's not being able to be used for commercial, so there's no chance of it being used as Airbnb under the current approval.
That's the condition is imposed to actually prevent
that would be my main concern.
Yeah.
And it does have limited amenities. It's got no provision for a washing machine or anything like that. So I think there's reasonable protection there to stop it from being converted into somewhere where somebody would live full time without being reliant on the main flat. But yeah, so it's one of those kind of like, yeah, okay, not quite sure, and I believe what we've been told by the applicant based on what's been said by the residents? I would like to see some clarity. I would have liked to have seen some clarity on that as well, but I don't think that's going to happen. But yeah, yeah, there's not a lot we can refuse this on, I don't think.
I'll step in before Miss Harrington because I'm sure she'll say this much more in planning terms than I would. Unfortunately, we have to look at what we're and believe all we're told, even though we may have suspicions and warning bells in our brains. You know, we have to look at it, take it at face value, and then hopefully enforcement will act afterwards should things go wrong. Councillor Sidaway?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I agree. That's my view that I don't see it as being different enough. And I know the change in the terminology has put us into this position. I think we have to rely on the fact that enforcement is there for this, and that the neighbours can then, if they consider it being occupied, they can report that and enforcement will take action. And on that basis, I think there is no reason to refuse it. I'd be happy to propose that we move on and accept it.
Okay, have I got a seconder for that before Councillor Rampton speaks? Thank you, Councillor Chapman-Law. Councillor Rampton.
Yes, thank you. I mean, this ancillary accommodation is a bit of a loophole, really, isn't it? It does give people the ability to perhaps, I wouldn't say exploit the planning system, but that's kind of what I mean, really. But the building is there, and apart from, you know, the footprint of the building is there, and apart from some changes to the to putting windows in, it's not bigger than what's there already. I disagree with whoever spoke about enforcement. As something in my ward, a house with an ancillary building which has been occupied, and it's been allowed to go on for 10 years despite residents complaining for much of that time, and it's now going to be acceptable because it has gone on for 10 years. I suppose my only reassurance is that 19 residents have raised objections to this, so there'll be at least 19 people keeping an eye on it if it were to be, because obviously you can put an air fryer and a microwave in a little kitchenette area. You've got a kitchen and you can go to the laundrette, so of course you could live in there. But having an annex, an ancillary per se, is I think quite a good thing. I'm not sure it's a good thing in this particular circumstance, but again, I can't see any reasons to refuse.
Yeah, I could see the value of an annex if it was a ground floor flat apply, but the upstairs flat, we're having to come all down that external staircase to take meals out. It doesn't seem a practical solution, but we're not looking at practical. I mean, that's not the sort of thing we're supposed to be considering. So I have to put that to the back of my mind. But so we've got a motion that to accept that's been seconded. I see no other speakers, so we'll put it to the vote now. If you think we should accept this application, will you vote in favour now, please?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5.
And those against?
1
and 2.
2.
And abstentions?
None.
None.
That makes 7.
Thank you. So that is accepted reluctantly on all parts, I think, but under legislation and planning rules, I don't think we've got any option, unfortunately. But the applicant will have noted, I hope, our concerns and take them on board. So we'll have a slight pause before we go on to the next item, item 6B.
we're live.
So welcome back to item 2, item 6B on today's agenda, which is 20 Lancaster Drive, Pool, and I'll hand over to the presenting officer, Camilla Betsidas.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. The application that I'm presenting is for 20 Lancaster Drive, Broadstone Pool. This scheme is for the proposed erection of side and rear extensions, within these to include the construction of a porch and garage, alterations to the rear garden, as well as the proposal to widen the driveway and parking area. The existing outbuilding structures and chimney are to be demolished. This application is being brought to committee in accordance with the Constitution, given that at the time the application was submitted, the applicant was working for the LPA in the planning sector. This is the application site here, pinned in red, which is located north of Lancaster Drive and is occupied by a detached bungalow. There are trees and hedges surrounding the site. However, the hedges along here have now been removed. So the application site is visible both from Lancaster Drive and Lancaster Close. The character of the area is residential, with the dwellings along Lancaster Drive consisting of traditional bungalows. However, some have been converted to chalet bungalows. These are wider views of the street scene along Lancaster Drive. These are photos of the site. As you can see, the existing dwelling is finished in brick with a traditional hipped roof. The land rises steeply towards the rear of the plot, as shown in the photo on the top right here. These are the proposed block plan and floor plans. The dashed blue lines show the existing outbuildings and structures to be demolished. The dwelling sits on a large plot, and the light grey elements here show that the rear extension would occupy the full width of the plot, sitting adjacent to the boundary with number 18 Lancaster Drive. This is the existing and proposed front elevation. The proposed flat roof extension here would be set back from the dwelling's front elevation. However, its eaves would be significantly higher than those of the existing dwelling. This, together with its large width of 12 metres, would introduce a visually dominant and incongruous form of development, which would fail to integrate with the existing dwelling, with the design of the existing dwelling and roof form of the bungalow, resulting in harm to the visual amenity of Lancaster Drive. Also, the proposed rear extension located behind the flat roof element here would introduce a large gable to the side elevation, and due to its siting and the topography of the site, it would be visible from Lancaster Close when viewed adjacent to number 18 Lancaster Drive. It would also be seen from the head of the cul-de-sac. Although the site is currently screened by the overgrown trees here, in the winter months, this gable element would be readily visible, resulting in a prominent and visually intrusive feature in the street scene. In addition, whilst the rear elevation of the proposed dwelling would not be visible from the street scene on Lancaster Close, the combination of different roof forms and the use of black cladding would fail to preserve or enhance the character of the existing bungalow as required by policies PP 27 of the Pool Local Plan and BP 8 of the Broadstone Neighbourhood Plan. It should also be noted that the extensions would introduce windows of various widths and designs with no consistent design approach across the extensions. So when considered alongside the various roof forms, the proposal would appear incoherent with the appearance of the existing bungalow. These are photos taken from number 18 Lancaster Drive. In regards to the development's impact on neighbouring amenity, it is important to note that the application site sits at a higher ground level than the neighbouring property number 18, as shown in these photos here. The red line here shows roughly the building line of the proposed rear extension. This is the existing and proposed side elevation facing number 18 Lancaster Drive. The proposed flat roof side extension, circled in red, due to its eaves height and the siting adjacent to the shared boundary with number 18, would appear as a dominant structure when viewed from this neighbouring property, as shown in the previous photos. In addition, the proposed gable element, also circled in red, would increase this harm, given that its large depth of 6 metres and blank facade along the shared boundary, which would be intensified by the use of black cladding, creating an unacceptable sense of enclosure and oppression to the occupiers of number 18, both from their rear-facing windows and from the private garden area, resulting in an overbearing impact on the residential amenity. It is noted that the agent on this application has stated that an outbuilding or a 2-metre fence could be erected along the boundary with number 18 and the permitted development rights. However, such structures could not be comparable to the proposals due to their height of 3.5 metres and 4.5 metres respectively, introducing a significantly greater level of visual enclosure. Having regard to the considerations discussed, the application is recommended for refusal. However, had the proposal been acceptable, it would not result in highway safety concerns. Also, subject to conditions that the scheme would not have a harmful impact on the trees, and the proposal would not increase the risk of surface water flooding. I note that the third reason for refusal was regarding biodiversity, as has been amended in the addendum sheet. The ecology officer has now assessed the submitted bat survey and does not object to the proposal, subject to the implementation of the biodiversity enhancements. Thank you.
Thank you. So we move on to speakers. In fact, there's only one, the applicant Laura Bright.
Thank you, members. I'm actually going to change a little bit what I was going to say today based on what I've seen in that presentation. But I would like to make a few points before I do. My first point is to emphasise that 20 Lancaster Drive is quite different to the established context of Lancaster Drive, where the buildings, all the existing buildings, apart from my plot, are prominent in the street scene. Those existing bungalows and shallow bungalows are positioned 9 metres back from the road. They've got no boundary screening, they're often open with driveways. This plot's positioned 23 metres back from the road, and the actual extension is 30 metres back, and its roof apex further back than that. It's not perceived in views down the road at all due to the setbacks and the screening, and it will be barely glimpsed from views going up the road, and from some of the photographs I've taken in Lancaster Close, it won't be visible at all. Could we go on to the photo where the red line was on where you think the back boundary is of this extension? So I'd like to draw members' attention to Plan 1 in the drawings I circulated, which show 18 Lancaster Drive adjacent to my property. Now, 18 Lancaster Drive has extended, and now the rear building line of my proposed extension, and certainly the bit that the case officer is concerned with, is not beyond the rear building line of their extension. You can quite clearly see that on these plans, that the rear building line of the extension only extends to part way through where the existing shed is. So it's not at all where that red line is. That is completely inaccurate. That plan on the top right is completely inaccurate because it doesn't show the extension of number 18. So there are a number of views I've included. When you stand at the back windows of number 18, they have the full outlook over their rear garden. They will not perceive this extension because it does not extend beyond their rear building line, and that is evidenced on these plans. They will be able to see the extension when they stand at the end of their garden and look back. They'll be able to see their own property. It's very typical in a suburban street scene that when you stand at the end of your garden, you can see some properties. I can see my neighbour at number 22. It doesn't mean it's harmful. There's also no boundary fencing or hedging in that photo. It won't extend beyond that shed. It doesn't even extend in the same orientation as that shed. The spacing to number 18 actually extends to 6 metres at that point, So I think it would be very difficult to conclude it is materially harmful to their amenities, certainly not their outlook from their windows. And I don't think it will be oppressive to their rear garden, given the whole length of that stone wall is not enclosed by the extension. I'd also like to draw members' attention to the views I showed from Lancaster Close in my submission, view 5, 6 and 7. We took those with a height marker in place. The extension is not visible from Lancaster Close. That number 18 Lancaster Drive is about 6 metres high and itself is 2 metres higher than Lancaster Close. It will not be visible from there. To say it's unduly prominent is, again, quite frankly, inaccurate. So it's not unduly prominent from Lancaster Close. The only view from Lancaster Drive is up the driveway, where it's set over 30 metres back. It doesn't intrude beyond the building line with number 18. And the design is a deliberate contemporary addition to number 20. It has to respect and relate to the existing building under policy PP27. It respects it by retaining the principal elevation and roof form. It doesn't alter the bungalow. I love that bungalow how it is. I don't want to alter it. Everyone else has rendered their bungalows white and done other things to them. I don't want to do that. I want to keep the integrity of the bungalow, link it with a small flat roof linking element to the new extension, creating a clear distinction between old and new. The new extension is lower in height than the existing bungalow, is set significantly further back, and when viewed from the front, is not as wide, so it is subservient. It does have different windows to serve different rooms. So does the existing bungalow. I expect so do your homes you live in as well. We all have different windows to serve the different internal functions. That's actually part of good design. So I think the architectural concept is a solid one. The policy isn't about architectural taste. It's about whether it respects and relates to the bungalow. The front element of brickwork relates to that using the red brick, and then it creates a subservient addition to it. So I'd really ask members to think whether these reasons for refusal are accurate and could be substantiated at appeal, because certainly that red line is entirely inaccurate where the rear building line of this extension will be. And I think if that is on the basis that this application is being assessed, that needs some serious consideration, because you can see that it is actually within the dotted blue line of the shed on all the plans. Thank you.
Thank you. I have let you overrun slightly, so I didn't want to cut you off in mid-flow. And the only other speaker is the ward councillor, who is no longer a member of, for this item, is not acting as a member of this committee, but as ward councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Hello again. The reason I recused myself from the meeting is not because of the conversation with the applicant, because until this morning I hadn't spoken to Laura about the property. But as Chair of Broadstone Town Council and a member of the Broadstone Town Council Planning Committee, we had reviewed this application before and found no reason to comment or turn it down or to put an objection in. So therefore, I've made my decision. So it would be wrong for me to stay on the committee. However, the Broadstone Neighbourhood Plan is used as one of the reasons, and I just want to talk about the Broadstone Neighbourhood Plan. It's the second oldest neighbourhood plan in Poole, and the person who wrote that plan is also on the planning committee of Broadstone Town Council, and again, we saw no breach in any of the terms in that. And having then read this report, I spoke to him again, and once again, we can find that there is no breach at all in any of the terms in that plan. And if you look at PP27, I think if you listen to the way Laura presented it, I think you would get the understanding that if the main structure of the bungalow is staying much the same in keeping with how it was when it was first built, then I think it is very much not in breach of PP27. A couple of other things I wanted to just point out. There's no objection from the neighbour, and one of the other main reasons for objection is because of view from 18. I think, as Laura's eloquently pointed out, it is not as displayed on that particular photograph. And if it was, then the neighbour would probably object, and the neighbour has not objected. They're quite happy with it. The nature of Lancaster Drive, for those of you that didn't go and see it, I hope you all did, is that it's like that. And generally, from every property, you're looking down at the property below you. And if you're looking up, you can probably see the property above you. And there are various heights, and some are already chaletted and some are bigger than others. And I don't think that this is particularly different. The other thing, just finally from me, is that when talking to our planning team about it, we felt very strongly that if this was to go to appeal, it would not pass. You know, the appeal would be successful, and it would be approved. I think if you look at the last slide for the refusal, they actually look like reasons to approve it because there were no other objections. I think that was basically saying. So the only objections in front of you are PP27 and the Broadstone Neighbourhood Plan, and I don't think they are. I don't think they hold water in this particular instance. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sidaway. So we move on to questions from committee members, if any. Councillor Martin.
Point out, is the outside finish of a building a planning issue anyway? You know, whether it's brick or rendered or clad, it's not a planning concern anyway, really, is it?
It is. Because that's external materials can impact the character appearance of the area. I don't know whether you get confused with painting. Painting the front of the building is not development requiring plan permission, but certainly the surfacing material is, if it's were to change from what's already on the building.
I'm just comment. I didn't know that. So if I wanted the outside of my house to be rendered, it make no other changes, I would have to have planning permission.
Correct.
Oh.
Any more questions? No?
I recommend it for approval.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Right, I think I saw Councillor Rampton first, just. So, can you run over any relevant conditions to make sure that we've, you know?
The conditions would essentially be in terms of trees. I believe there's a work supervision condition that we will need to impose, and compliance with the impact assessment that was submitted, and also compliance with the BAT survey, the biodiversity enhancements.
In addition, would be the standard 3 years and a list of approved drawings and materials as stated in the application. Chair, before we go to the vote, can members explain the reasons why for going against the officer's decision, and why this application should be approved for the record?
So, I mean, we've heard some already. Councillor Martin.
I really fully agree with the applicant's point about keeping the original building in red brick, because red brick does last, whereas render has to be repainted every so often. It's a lot higher maintenance, and it looks a little bit old-fashioned as well. I really like the black that she's used on the side. It's different, it's modern. I appreciate what the case officer's commenting about the windows, but I don't think, because I would be the same, I like things to look the same as, but but it's a matter of personal choice. I think it's definitely within PP27 design, and there are no objections from neighbours. So that would be my reasons. It definitely is within PP27, and it's, you know, I think it's an asset, if anything, because it starts to modernise the street.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman, though.
Yeah, I think sort of one of the reasons for me. I mean, when I first saw the front elevations, I was a bit like, "Oh, don't know about that." But it was for me it's about the positions of the rear of the buildings relative to each other, and I think what the report suggests with the red line and that sort of stuff kind of isn't quite right. And it actually took me a little bit of time to get my head around some of the level changes and stuff. And I think a site visit probably would have been quite handy to really kind of get a proper idea of what it actually looks like with all the different levels and slopes and gradients. But yeah, I think it's just I don't see some of the problems that have been suggested with overlooking and being overbearing. I don't think they kind of hold water quite. Sorry.
Thank you. Is that adequate for your report?
Yeah, thank you. I would just like to say that in terms of this site plan here, as mentioned, that saying that it is not accurate, that is the plan that was submitted to us by the architect. That is what they're submitting to propose. That is bearing in mind that the extension next door has already been built. So that is where it will be, where it would be. That is not just a suggestion from us, or that's not a plan that we've suggested. That is what they're proposing, that that's where the rear extension will be there. So roughly, just looking from this outbuilding here, that is what we're trying to kind of achieve, of where we're saying that is roughly where it would be. In terms of PP27 that we mentioned, the fact that it's in congress with the existing building, that obviously I've already mentioned in my report the reasons for it. And in terms of this here, yes, I did not mention that it will be contrary to PP27 in terms of being overbearing, but that is specifically in policy PP27. No development should be overbearing or oppressive to any neighbours. Thank you.
So any further reasons for going against the officer recommendation before we go any further? No. Okay. So could you read them back to us, Ms. Harrington?
Thank you, Chair. So the proposed conditions, as discussed, were 3 years for implementation. Condition with materials as set out in the approved plans. What was the tree works condition?
The tree was...
Bear with me, Chair.
So,
is it prior to? Oh, you can pick it up.
Yeah, so it was arboricultural supervision during the works and implementation of the arboricultural method statement and tree protection plan.
And the implementation of biodiversity enhancements.
Should also be noted that in terms of the, if we're going to be posting a condition in terms of the list of plans that have been submitted, there is a discrepancy between the plans that have been submitted in terms of the floor plan and the site plans. So I'll show you here. This is suggesting that the side elevation of this extension here, the flat roof extension, the entrance would be there. However, on this key here, which is the site plan they submitted, it suggests it's right on the boundary. So something to consider.
Chair, is it okay to ask the applicant to provide revised drawings more accurately displaying the layout of that?
I think that would be a good idea. Whether it will affect our decision at all, I'm doubtful, but I think certainly there needs clarity. Definitely there needs to be clarity. Are you happy?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, please do. Can you come to the microphone again?
Yes, I sort of want to point at a plan that where the flat roof is, then that side entrance is recessed. So it's
Hang on, you might get picked up on my mic. I don't know whether you will.
I'll try and shout. So the side gate comes through there, and then that second entrance, this bit is recessed. So the second entrance is on the side and is recessed in there. So you've got a side gate coming in there, then this sort of overhangs, and then that's recessed in. So the side entrance isn't visible from the front. It's recessed, so you can then go into the utility space. I can sort the dog out and everything, but it's recessed. So it's not there. It's within there. So if you marry up the floor plans with the site plan, that it does work.
Yeah. Can you go to the one that shows the brick surround? Yes, that one. So at what point is that?
So then you're viewing back through the recess at the entrance. It's not actually on the very side. That's a view in of the recessed door. Obviously, you don't get
Because it looks as though it's forward of the walls.
In my statement that I submitted, there's a conceptual 3D plan which illustrates it better. I don't know if it's possible to bring that up if anybody's got it on their shared. Shared plan, but that sort of demonstrates the recess and how the entrance works. Probably the best way.
Chair, I think it'd be best if, subject to approval through you and the head of planning operations, to receive a sketch clarifying the situation and plans, and make it clear that acceptability is essentially based on the division, and that's not sticking out right against the boundary.
I think that's a good idea because we have. I don't feel I've got clarity from what the applicants just presented to me. So I think Ms Harrington's suggestion is a good one. So that will need writing into the decision notice as well.
Well, we won't need. The decision wouldn't be issued.
Well, not the decision notice, but the
recommendation. And in addition to the material conditions, so there would be biodiversity enhancements and conditioning the materials to match as stated in the application.
So I think we've taken the vote, haven't we? Yes. No, we haven't. It's good.
Get ahead of yourself.
Yes, well, I mean, we don't usually have this part of a meeting. It doesn't usually get to this stage. So we've got a motion that has been seconded to approve this application. So if you think it should be approved, will you vote now?
That is unanimous, Chair.
Right, so I don't need to ask about against or abstentions because there aren't any. So I think that closes the meeting. Thank you, everybody.